What if I told you that you can communicate your APIs using natural language? Well, that is what we are going to do today. Now, all this is possible with something called as MCP server. Now, this is something has been buzzing around for quite a while now. And today we are going to learn how we can use or utilize MCP servers to communicate with our APIs. Now, this API may be something that you have worked upon in your office. There's a project that you have built in your office or at your workplace. Or maybe you are doing a personal project and there's an API system that you have built, and then you want to communicate to that API system using natural language. Just as in ChatGPT, you type something and then you get a response from ChatGPT. But in this very case, when you are using this MCP, when you type something in your maybe ChatGPT or some other LLM model, it is instead going to your API system, get that response, and then show you back in a natural language way. Alright, so with this said, with this context set, let's dive in and see how we can actually do this. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, what do we need? So we need an API system. Now this API system can be your own project or some other APIs that you know of. Okay, and then we need a LLM that in our case is going to be Claude AI. In between, what are we going to keep is, we are going to keep a MCP server. Okay, so now our API system is going to host several APIs. MCP server is a layer in between this API system and the LLM or the Claude AI for our case, or let's call it an MCP client, which over here is going to be Claude AI. Why I'm using Claude AI is because Claude AI has got this functionality built in that it can communicate with an MCP server. So that's the only reason. ChatGPT yet has to offer that usability or expose that functionality, but at the moment it doesn't really have that. Okay, so now we learn about each of these things one by one. So first of all, this API system, we need to build this API system. Now there are several ways, or if you already have an API system, pretty good, you can use that. But if you're going to build it from scratch, what is the tech stack that we are going to use to build this API system? So I'm going to use C# over here. Okay, and C# will be hosting this API, and I'm going to do it on my VSCode. Okay, over my Mac Mini, let's call it, because I'm using a Mac Mini, so let's build it over Mac Mini. Then this MCP server. Now this MCP server is something that we'll have to build. Okay, so let's look at this model context protocol. Now I see it already has a TypeScript SDK. Okay, but let's see if there are other SDKs also available, because we are building it with C#. Okay, so we have a C# SDK also. So this MCP server that we'll be building, that again will be on C#. Alright, so let's add that also here. So this MCP server also will be on C#, and again we will be using VSCode to build this server. VSCode. Okay, and then Claude AI. So we'll be using the Claude AI's desktop version, because at the moment again Claude AI desktop only supports the MCP thing. Okay, so this is what we have to. This is what the tech stack should look like. All right, so let's very quickly see how it's going to work. Now Claude AI is going to talk to MCP server. MCP server is going to talk to our Claude system, our API system, sorry, and then this MCP or Claude AI is going to talk in natural language, so let's call it NL, and then MCP server, it's going to actually it's going to talk to our API, but that will not be using natural language. So the communication between MCP client and the MCP server will only happen in natural language. MCP server is going to actually hit the API. API is going to give back a response, maybe some JSON response. Okay, and then MCP server is going to give that JSON response back to this MCP client or the Claude AI. So that again will be JSON. Okay, and then Claude AI will show you the response in a natural language. So let's say if this API system is a weather API that we have built, and you ask for a country's weather, it will hit the weather API, it will give you a JSON response, MCP server gives back the JSON response to the MCP client. So this is how it will happen. This is how it will work in a nutshell. So now let's get started with the coding. So the first thing that we need to do now is build this weather API using C# and VSCode over Mac Mini. Okay. So let's head over to the terminal and let's see. So unlike Visual Studio, the regular Visual Studio, where we can select a template for web API. Here in VS Code we do not have that liberty. So we need to figure out what templates that we have is. For that, let's do this. So .NET new and then -icon list. So now you see I get a few things over here. Now these are the available templates that we have for. So you see one is for web API and the short name is web API. So now if we use this kind of template, we'll actually get some scaffolding done and we'll get a .NET template that supports web API productions. Okay, now how do we create a new project using this template? So we do .NET new and we do .NET new and then we need a web API. So we do web API and then alpha n and then let's just call it my API project. Okay, so now it is trying to restore all everything. And if now we go to our finder, okay, and let's go to my user. Okay, and I should see my API project over here. Okay, cool. Now let's let's head into this path and cd into it. Okay, and then let's open the VS Code for this project. Yes. Okay, so here is the folder structure that we get. Okay, so we get a program.cs, we get SLN file, and we also get a CS clause. Now, if you look at the program.cs file, let's see what we have got here. We have got this. Okay, we have got a get endpoint, which has been mapped over here, and then there is this record. Okay, I do not see a controllers folder over here, unlike the Visual Studio that we get. So everything else, or maybe everything, the controllers and everything is actually written over here. See? Okay. But before we do any changes, before we make this project a more structured one, let's see if it is actually working. So let's open the terminal. Let's do .NET build. Let's see if it builds first of all. Okay, so it did build, and now let's run this and see what do we get. Okay, so we get a URL. Let's copy this and let's paste it to our browser. And what was the name of the controller? Weather forecast. Okay, let's copy this also and let's see what we get. So we did not get anything because there was such a wrong over here. Okay, yeah. So we get this thing over here. Maybe this is the response of this API, the forecast API that it has done. Let's see if it is actually doing it. So it should return us an array of weather forecast. It would give us a date and something else. Okay, let's see what it is. What is weather forecast? So it takes a date, temperature and summary, and then it gives you a temperature. I think it is in Fahrenheit. It takes a Celsius temperature and then I think it gives a Fahrenheit temperature. Okay, maybe it works. Whatever it is giving us something, and that's what we want. So this is a dummy API project. If you have the API project, but in code. Otherwise, we just use this API for the time being. Okay. So the temperature is 48, summary is cool, temperature in Fahrenheit is 180. Okay, cool, fine. So this is what we get. So now let's make it a little more structured. Let's add a model folder where we'll, make this weather forecast model into it, and then we can also add a controllers folder. And this is how we'll structure it a little bit so that it makes sense when we read through it again or when we try to debug it. Okay, let's do that. So first of all, let's add a folder for models. Then let's also add a folder for controller. Okay. So inside the models, let's add this weather forecast model. Okay. And so we need the fields for this weather forecast, right? So first of all, let's add a namespace to it. The namespace is going to be my API project.models, and this is going to be my weather forecast model. Okay. Now let's add a controller equal on weather forecast controller .cs. Okay. The namespace again is going to be my API project. Okay. And then, okay, so we have made this class for the forecast controller, which is coming from controller base, and let's add the necessary stuff everywhere. Okay, so this code I've completed over here, but it is nothing else. It is just the same thing that was already present in the program.cs. So we need to remove all these things from here. Okay, let's remove this. Let's remove this also. It's comment this rather. And what is wrong with this? We need to import the models using my API project models. That should fix that error. Okay, fine. So we are good with this. Okay, so now let's build it again and let's see what we get. Built just fine. Now let's go back to this URL again and hit enter. Okay, so now let's not go to figure out where is my weather forecast controller. Okay, also let's remove this first of all and let's clean up our program.cs. तो swagger be there, we have got this. Then we also need something map our controllers. So after map. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I've done is I have cleaned up my program.cs. I've mapped all the controllers, and I've removed all the code that was explicitly done for the weather API for the weather forecast controller over here. I've removed all of those. I have cleaned up this code, and over here in the controllers folder, I've added this controller, and this has got a get endpoint, and it is doing all of this stuff. Pretty simple. This is a basic API project that we would have otherwise done. So let it be this thing. Okay. All right, fine. So we are good so far. Okay, so now our web API project is ready. Now we need to build the MCP server layer. So let me start my screen share again and let's see. Okay, so if we go to this drawing again, our API system is ready. Now we need to build this MCP server. Now we have this repository from GitHub, and here it says that we have a C# SDK for model context protocol. So let's look at this C# SDK. And if we come to this documentation, we'll see that we need to install this NuGet package, model context protocol pre-release, and then all this code is there. Okay.
All right. Getting started.
So this is getting started, and what is this? We started client. Okay, so this getting started client. So I think this needs to get started writing a client MCP created the same method as used essentially. Okay, this is for the client. So let's come here and getting started. It says server. So this is what we need to add. Okay, MCP server to type echo L.
Physics.
So this is like too much of code actually. Huh? So probably we'll have to change something a little bit. I don't really want to do too much of that kind of code over here. Let's see if we have a JavaScript SDK also. And I think we do have one SDK. Okay, so we have this TypeScript SDK. And let's see if that is less of code. MCP server. Okay, and then okay, this is how we add a tool. Okay, so of course, JavaScript is a little less code. Now let's change the implementation a little bit. Let's go back to this Excali draw over here, and this MCP server we wrote as we were building into C# and VSCode. So let's delete this and let's do this in TypeScript. Okay, and let's use bun. Bun the Visual Studio Code VS Code to get this task. Well, there's a little change in the plan, but I hope you guys will follow. That should not be a favor for deal. If you want to spend so much time reading and understanding the C# code, let me know. I'll do a separate video for that, or if you yourself can go through it. If there is any problem, you can comment that problem, and I try to figure out the solution for that. Okay. So for now, let's get started with the TypeScript SDK implementation of MCP server. Okay, let's jump into it. Okay, so now let's open a new terminal and let's create a new folder called my MCP server. Let's cd into that my MCP server folder and let's initialize a new one project. If something happened or maybe it is burned in it. Okay, let's make a blank project and yeah, so that works. It says run index.ts and it says hello Viagra. Well, let's open this code in Visual Studio and see what we get. So inside the index.ts we actually do not have anything, and that's okay because we made a new blank project. So if we go to this model context protocol servers repository, it says there's a quick start and let's create a symbol MCP server. Let's copy this entire thing over here. Let's go back to our VS Code, remove all of this and paste this. there are some errors coming up because it is not able to find this model context per pound, right? So let's head back and we need to install this. Let's copy this and open a new terminal window and let's paste that and hit enter. So now it should install the model context protocol / SDK npm project into it, and it has done it. So let's save it and our errors should be gone. Yes, so they are gone. Now let's first try to understand what this file is doing. Okay, so it got or it imported MCP server from this place. All right, and then there is this stdio server transport. So we'll come back to this later in a little while. And then there is this another npm project called Zod. So if you already know what Zod is, okay, fine, very good. But if not, then Zod is another npm project which actually defines the data type for you. Okay, so if you see this b parameter over here, it is of type z dot number and not just number. So Zod, now because you are using Zod, you are doing z dot number or z dot number. Okay, it's just another way of defining data types. That's it for now for Zod. Don't worry much about the Zod thing over here. All right, what next? Now the next thing is it is made a server and named it demo and the version is this. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now this is where the magic happens. You see the server tool. Now what actually happens with MCP is going to expose some functionality to Claude or to some LLM AI model. Now how does it do it? By making different tools. So over here, add is one tool. Okay, it is going to expose the add tool to Claude in our case as per what we are building. Similarly, you can create several other tools also. Okay, now one of the tools that we'll be writing is will be communicating with the API that we have built. Okay, what next? Now there is a resource. This is the dynamic greeting, or maybe you can understand it like this is what how Claude is going to initiate some conversation with MCP. Okay, and then we are okay. This is the transport that we are using, the std IU server transport. We'll come back to that later. We'll that you understand it, but very on a very high level, you can understand it as you could use an HTTP protocol also over here. Otherwise, for now, we are just using the standard input-output server transport. Okay, so we are not using HTTP over here. Okay, but we could have done that, and if you read through the MCP GitHub repo, all the documents over there, somewhere you find how you can change this HTTP to HTTP server transport type. Okay, and then it says server.connect. So this is what the index.ts is actually doing. We just copy the port from the GitHub repo of MCP server, and that's it in the index.ts. Next, we'll be adding, some code or maybe exposing another tool that is going to communicate with our API. All right, so let's do that now. So our API, if you recall, we created a solution called My API project. And our API was this. This is what we wrote over this. So let me make it big. Let's try to run this one more time. Okay, now let's run it. Okay, so our API is resting on this URL over here. Now, if I open this and see what we did over there, and I think the name was weather forecast. Okay, so what is spelling? Okay, yeah. So this is what we were getting when we hit our API. Now we have to add this API call into the MCP server. Okay. So how do we do it? Now this is one tool that it has exposed, and this very file over here needs to call our API. So how do we do it? Okay, so first of all, let's call our API. in order to call our API here, we need to, in order to make the API calls, there is this NuGet package or NPM package called Axios. So let's first install that. Now we're using this bun, the bun install Axios. Okay, so now it was add Axios package to our current project. And now let me add the API call over here. So to async function get
weather forecast. And then so
okay. Where do we catch this error or exception? And then let's try to catch the response. And because we are using Axios, I think we should get it. Yes, we did. And then let's call the get function over here and let's make a direct call this thing. And then just return response data. Cool. Pretty easy. And let me also just log a few errors responses if we do get something.
was there something wrong with the API call? And let's mention the add. Otherwise, return none.
Okay, fine. So this in a very quick fashion, this is how our API will be called. Now we need to call this method inside one of the tools that is written over here. Let's make a new tool. So meet server bot tool, okay. And then what do? We give a tool's name. So if you see here where we have given the tool's name add, we need to give our tool a. So let's make it weather. And just make sure whenever you give a tool's name, you are not giving any spaces into it. So I learned this the hard way, so I'm telling you. And what else? So it takes in a tool, it takes in the name, param scheme or annotation. That is the next parameter of it. So let's keep it empty for now. We don't really have any force operation as of now. And then let's call our method. Let's do a little check over here. If data is not present or if it is null, or if it is not null, then you return contact. Okay, and what country we want? So we know the type will be text
And text.
okay. Otherwise, if we get the data, then let's map it.
Let's go for loop. We have something wrong. Data.map.
Okay, and how do we map it? We're about to iterate over each of the entries.
Entry can be of any type.
And
Let's return.
We'll need a backtick over here. So my keyboard has a little problem. It doesn't really, gives me the backtick because of some issue. Or
No, MP dot. We are not getting bait.
because we have made the entry of type LE, so we don't really get the data types or the members that are present in the entry, because we don't know what kind of model the weather forecast API is going to give us. We make it any, and then we specify the date and the summary ourselves, because we know this is what is going to come out of it.
This is the census.
All right, I think this should be it, and then let's do a join so that everything comes on a new line. Okay, and then just return this text. Alright, so I think we are good so far. This should work. Now we should see two tools on Claude. One is air and one is weather. Okay, so now it's finally tied to come to the main part, that is Claude. Now this, as I told earlier, this only works with the Claude desktop version, so you'll have to install that. So let's go ahead with the Claude setup now. So if you have not already installed it, you can go to this. I'll tell you the desktop Claude desktop application link, and I will also mention it in my video's description. So you can download the Claude from it. I already have it, so I'm not going to do it, but you can just choose your operating system and download it. Okay. So now let's move ahead with the Claude setup. Okay, so let's open Claude, and here is the Claude desktop application that has come up. So one important thing, this will only work with Claude if you have got the developer mode enabled. Now how do we enable the developer mode on Claude? So I think you have to go to help, and you see that enable developer mode allows access to developer tools and debugging. Let's enable this. Okay, and then Claude should restart. Now when it restarts, you'll have to go to we need to edit, okay, MCP log file, and there should be some way where we can actually edit the config file. Okay, let's go to settings, and let's set to developer, and you see this edit config. So we get that, and this is the config file. So let's open this with Visual Studio Code. Open, and so we at the moment we do not have any servers configured in Claude or MCP servers configured in Claude. So how do we do that? Let's hit this documentation over here, and let's see how we can do that.
Okay, so there should be something building your server.
Okay, so here is this. Now this is something that we need to copy.
And let's go back to our VSCode and let's paste this.
Okay, so this is the name of a server, MCP servers. Sorry, this is the uh, root node, which is MCP server, and then this is the name of the server. So let's call it, let's let this be whether it's open or not. Then this is the command. So what command do we want? We want the bun command. Okay, and then in arguments, we really don't need out of it. We want the index.ts to come up, right? For index.ts to come up, let's revoke this comma over here. Unfortunately, Claude will not be able to identify bun or the index itself altogether. Okay, so we need to give a relative path for both bun and index.ts. So if I do which bun, I think over here, I should get the path to path. So let's copy this. And over here, let's give us. So if you are on a Windows machine, maybe which bun command won't work. So we'll have to, I think it is, I'm not sure what command is it for Windows, but you can figure it out. If not, let me know. I'll make a, let me know. You can write this in comment and I'll let you know. And for index.ts, we need the path also. So let's find the path for index.ts and yesterday, let's copy this again. And over here, let's add this path. Okay, let's save it and let's exit it. And now if I, okay, let's double check if actually saved it. Yeah, okay, fine, it is there. Okay, cool. So now let's close this, let's minimize this, and let's reopen Claude.
So something is not quite right.
Okay, I actually see this weather MCP server now, and yes, it is actually showing me my two tools, add and weather. Right, we created two tools over there. This was my first tool, and this was my second tool, and this was the first tool that came in. Right, add and weather are the two tools that we are getting. Okay, so I think this is it pretty much. Now you will be actually able to hit the weather API that we have written. So let us quickly test it out and see if it is actually working. Okay, can you tell me some weather updates? And my guess is that it should, hit our API and tell us something. Let's see. So that's thinking. I'm happy to check weather for you. Okay, so now you see Claude would like to use an external integration. This is nothing but our API that it is trying to find now, because we do not have a request body, it is empty. Let's do it allow once. And if you recall, we were getting temperature, we were getting date, and then there's something went wrong.
So we are not blogging anything, Arabic.
Okay, let's go to the open and spill off file and let us see where we can. So we actually bought the data, but in it really showed us. Okay, you see, we bought this data, we work at text, pleasing, and all those tags. So our API was hit from the MCP, from the Claude, and we actually bought this message from the server is this. Okay, and we did not get any error message actually. Is that message? method not found, but then it found it. Okay, let us try one more time. Let us see if it is able to do it. Yes, we did. Okay, so now this time it worked. You see, these are the summaries that we have given, and it is able to, put the results in a natural language format. So May 30, it was -8, and then it says 30. So this is probably our weather API that we have written. We are giving out random temperatures, okay, and random summaries. So -8 degrees Celsius was definitely not sweaty. But okay, for now we have understood that, our APIs are being hit with MCP. So this is how you can integrate MCP with any of your API projects that we have done. So this, I found it cool. I did it for my API project that I built at my old place, and then I presented them with this solution. And we are probably going to take up a new AI app, that lets users communicate with the APIs in a natural language. So I thought this was pretty cool and thought of making a video for that and show it to everyone else. Okay, so this is it about how we can integrate an API, your API project with MCP. But there are several other use cases, and in fact, there are several MCP servers that have already been built. Okay, now if you go to Model Context Protocol servers, you should see that several other servers have been built on the top. You see there's one for GitHub, then PostgreSQL also has a MCP server exposed, Slack, and then SQLite, Brave Search. All these are existing MCP servers that have been built. Okay, so I think this is it pretty much about this video about how we can integrate MCP servers to your API projects. If you have any questions, or if you would like if you would like me to do a similar video and integrate an MCP server with an existing system, let me know in the comments and I'll do that also. Also, one more thing I'd like to add at the end is, so we have not added any authentication to it, but that also could be done. I mean, when the MCP server does deploy, you can give it the JWT token or the access token or whatever authentication mechanism you're doing, and then that also is doable. All right, cool. Then this is it pretty much about MCP servers, and I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, if it was worth your time, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.